Hey guys, today we'll be taking a look at the latest polls that have been released for the 2022 Senate elections, but only focus on the 10 most competitive races on the ballot. And when filled in, we do see a pretty surprising map. So Democrats right now are defending seats in Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, and New Hampshire, where Republicans are currently defending their seats in Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida. However, they do not have incumbents running in Pennsylvania, Ohio, or North Carolina. These three senators have chosen to retire. That's Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, Rob Portman in Ohio, and Richard Burr in North Carolina. So we do have 7 incumbents running for re-election, though, for their second or third terms, and that's what's going to make this race so competitive for the Senate. Both parties are definitely in it, and even though 538 gives Democrats a 70% chance at maintaining their majority, a 30% chance is still pretty high statistically, and that means that every single one of these races are going to be key in determining the balance of power of the upper chamber for the second half of Biden's first term. And so I'm going to start off with the races that are the most solid for the Democrats, and then slowly transition to the races that Republicans have the highest chance at winning. So by far, out of all 10 of these elections, the one that's most solid for Democrats right now is the one in Colorado. This is a state that voted for Joe Biden by 13.5 points in 2020, and of course, this is a state that Democrats flipped the Senate seat in 2020 as well, with John Hickenlooper defeating incumbent Cory Gardner. So in Colorado right now, Michael Bennet is running for a third full term in office against Joe Adea. Joe Adea is a very moderate Republican, and so if Republicans had chosen a more pro-Trump candidate, I think that Michael Bennet would be able to win by at least double digits. But at this point, I am projecting a 7-point race for the Democratic incumbent. That's basically the margin that he won by in 2016, or slightly under 5.7%. So Michael Bennet really did not do that well 6 years ago, but Colorado has also become much bluer than it was during that election. So Colorado right now, 9-point lead for Michael Bennet. He's led in every single poll against Joe Adea, and the most recent Emerson College poll shows Bennett up by 10. That's a major A-rated pollster. Public Policy has Bennett up by 11, and then even the Trafalgar Group, the most right-wing pollster in the country, has Bennett up by 6 points. So I think a 7-point margin really is very realistic, and so according to both my projection as well as the polls, Colorado right now is very much a likely Democratic state. 538 gives Michael Bennet right now a 91% chance at winning his re-election, basically the highest odds he's ever had. He started at 89, now he's got up to 91, so really not too significant of a shift over the last 3 months, but Colorado, even though it's competitive, it's definitely going to go to the Democrats, at least based on everything we're seeing at this point in time. Next up, we have a race that I really thought was going to be much more competitive for quite a while, and this is the election in New Hampshire. Maggie Hassan is running for her re-election to a second term, and Don Bolduc has recently won the Republican nomination. For quite a while, New Hampshire looked like that there was a pretty good chance that it was going to flip red. First, with Chris Sununu, he might have ran in this race, and if he did, I do think that Maggie Hassan would have lost this election, but Chris Sununu instead chose to run for re-election to a fourth term as governor of New Hampshire. And so Maggie Hassan then was going to face either Don Bolduc or Chuck Morse. Chuck Morse was the other Republican in the primary, and Don Bolduc eventually defeated Morse by just a 2-point margin. If Chuck Morse was the nominee, this race would be a lot more competitive. With Bolduc as the choice for the Republicans, he currently is down by 7.3% against the incumbent Hassan, and a 7.3% margin is pretty significant because for quite a while, Don Bolduc and Maggie Hassan were neck and neck before he won the GOP primary. Now, Chuck Morse actually led in a poll against Maggie Hassan, which is something that Don Bolduc never did, and Don Bolduc is a candidate that went out on stage and announced that he did not believe that Joe Biden won the 2020 presidential election, and in a state that Biden carried by 7.4%, it is unrealistic to think that Republicans are going to flip the Senate seat. Maggie Hassan in 2016 won a pretty impressive victory, defeating incumbent Kelly Ayotte. She was the incumbent senator in this state, and this was only one of 2 flips that occurred in that cycle. So Maggie Hassan right now, the polls as well as my own personal projection, has New Hampshire as a likely Democratic state. I think that Hassan will be able to win by a margin over 5%, but definitely nothing too close to double digits. However, in 2020, you did see that Jean Shaheen won her 4th term by 15.6% against Corky Messner, but 2020 really was a much better year for Democrats overall, and 538 currently also favors Hassan pretty significantly, giving her an 87% chance at winning her second term in office. And now we're going to move on to Pennsylvania, a state that really Republicans should be winning in, even though they have Mehmet Oz as the nominee. And Republicans, of course, are defending 5 seats, and Pennsylvania is the one that by far Democrats have the highest chance at winning. Florida, it's basically going to be almost impossible for Val Demings to defeat Marco Rubio. However, in North Carolina, Ohio, and Wisconsin, the GOP nominees are looking pretty vulnerable, but they do still have a nominal advantage. However, in Pennsylvania, this is the only seat currently held by a Republican that I really am confident the Democrats aren't going to flip this cycle. In Pennsylvania, we have an election between Mehmet Oz and John Fetterman. Mehmet Oz is, of course, known for the Dr. Oz show and has been on TV for over 2 decades. John Fetterman is the current lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, serving under Tom Wolf. And if you look at the polls, we're seeing a shockingly large margin for the lieutenant governor. John Fetterman right now leads by 8.9% and has maintained a very strong lead ever since he won the Democratic nomination. Every single poll released for this race has shown John Fetterman defeating Mehmet Oz in a general election in November. And so at this point, even Trafalgar has Fetterman up by 2%. A previous poll they did had Fetterman up by 5%, and these nominal shifts really don't matter too much. As long as Fetterman wins this race, it's going to be a flip for the Democratic Party, and that is going to be a pretty big deal. If Democrats had to defend Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia and not have a chance in Pennsylvania, their chances of winning the Senate would be significantly lower. But with this win in Pennsylvania, they really can defend their 50-seat majority or even expand to 51 seats if they can hold on to both Georgia and Nevada. And so 538 currently gives John Fetterman an 82% chance at winning his first term in office against Mehmet Oz. This might be a state that Joe Biden only won by 1.2%, but I do think that even in a year like 2022, John Fetterman can outperform the president, and John Fetterman's odds have only gone up over the last couple of months. When this forecast was first released, Fetterman only had a 35% chance of winning this race. Mehmet Oz, for quite a while, was the actual frontrunner in this election, but now it's become a 6.2% race in favor of John Fetterman, and so that's why Pennsylvania right now is going to be a likely Democratic state, the third likely Democratic state out of the 10 competitive races that we have on this map. And of course, that final likely state is going to be Arizona, where Mark Kelly is running for his re-election to a first full term in office. In 2020, Martha McSally ended her political career by losing to Mark Kelly and losing a second Senate election in a row for the Republican Party. She, of course, lost to Kyrsten Sinema in 2018, and then her loss in 2020 meant that Republicans would probably never nominate her for another race in the future. Kyrsten Sinema basically gave Democrats the majority 2 years ago, and so instead of choosing a moderate Republican in 2022, the Republican Party went in a completely different direction and chose Blake Masters. Blake Masters is, of course, the Trump-endorsed candidate, and he essentially pandered to the former president throughout the entirety of his campaign, and then eventually did win Trump's endorsement. And then Blake Masters is now the Republican nominee in this race to challenge Mark Kelly, and Mark Kelly is in a significantly better position because Blake Masters, as somebody that is so far to the right, is just incapable of pandering to more independent voters. In the polls right now, Mark Kelly leads by 7.5% and has led in every single poll that has ever been released for this race. Even though Joe Biden only won Arizona by 0.3%, Mark Kelly is severely outperforming the former president's margin 2 years ago, and so I am confident that Mark Kelly is going to hold onto his seat. If Democrats cannot win Arizona, they have no chance at maintaining the Senate majority. 538 currently gives Mark Kelly an 81% chance at winning this election. He has always been favored over Masters, but his odds, just like in Pennsylvania, are higher than they have ever been. At one point, he only had a 61% chance of winning. Going from 61 to 81, you have a pretty significant difference in how competitive this race is going to be. At 61, Republicans really did stand a very good chance, but now at just 19% that the Republicans have at winning this race, it's pretty much impossible at this point that Blake Masters is going to win. Arizona is only competitive because Arizona is a very purple state, but candidate quality matters much more than partisanship, and so Mark Kelly currently is on track to winning his re-election. Polls have it as a likely Democratic state, even though in my personal opinion, just like Pennsylvania, I think the margins are going to be slightly under 5%. And now that we have the 4 likely Democratic states out of the way, these next few races are going to be the most competitive ones of the 2022 cycle. And of course, these are the 2 elections in Nevada and Georgia, and then Wisconsin to a certain extent as well. But Nevada and Georgia especially, for a very long time, I've said that Nevada and Georgia are going to be the tipping point states. Whoever can win these races is going to win the Senate. If Democrats win both Nevada and Georgia, obviously they're going to hold on to at least 50 seats. But if Republicans win both, they of course, are going to be able to take the majority back. But the good thing with Democrats is that they do have Kamala Harris as the vice presidential tiebreaker, and so that means that Democrats only need to win one out of these two races. Now, of course, it will be easier for Democrats to win one than for Republicans to win two, but that does not mean that Democrats are guaranteed to win in both of these elections. We're seeing recently that Adam Laxalt is seeing a surge in support in Nevada, and so as Georgia is currently less competitive, I'm going to go over this race first. In the state of Georgia, Raphael Warnock is running for his first full term, just like Mark Kelly in Arizona. He was elected in a special election 2 years ago. His election actually had a runoff, and he eventually did defeat Kelly Loeffler, who was the appointed incumbent. And so in 2022, Herschel Walker is now the Republican nominee. And so in 2021, the issue for Kelly Loeffler was that she had nothing to do with Georgia. She never lived in the state. She was from Illinois, and she lost that race pretty badly, considering that Georgia was a Republican state for over 2 decades before Biden won it in 2020. And so in 2022, the Republican Party chose a much more genuine Georgian and somebody that also was a terrible speaker. Kelly Loeffler was much more coherent with her words, even though most of the time the things she said really weren't that great. But Herschel Walker is somebody that has been horrible on the campaign trail, and that's why Raphael Warnock, even though, in my opinion, he was by far the most vulnerable Democrat coming into this election, Warnock has led in the polls in every single month since the month of June, and he's basically been the leader in this race ever since then, with Herschel Walker at one point being the frontrunner. For a long time, it looked like Herschel Walker was going to become the next senator from Georgia, but right now, Warnock is significantly ahead. He's leading in most of the polls. A pretty significant majority of the polls have Warnock ahead, and polls in Georgia have been famously known to be very accurate, and so Warnock right now up by 2% is going to be pretty significant. I currently think that Georgia should be a tilt Democratic state based on how competitive it is, but the polls do suggest a 2-point margin of victory for Warnock, and I think that a runoff is still possible a second time. Georgia is a state that requires the winner to win at least a majority of the vote, and so Raphael Warnock currently has a 55% chance of winning according to 538, but many of the scenarios in which he does win are in runoffs. Herschel Walker, though, does have the higher chance of winning if it does come down to a runoff, because he does have more victories in runoffs based on 538 simulations, and so this race is closer than it has been for quite a while, and at one point, Walker had a 62% chance of winning. Like I said before, at one point, Herschel Walker was the frontrunner in this race, but now it is more competitive than ever. And the final Democratic state on this map, according to the polls, is going to be the state of Nevada. And so if Democrats can just win these 50 seats, they are set. They're going to win the majority. I think that this is what's going to happen. In the very end, I think a 50-50 Senate is going to be the most likely scenario, even though I think that there's a pretty good chance that Democrats can win 51 or possibly even 52 seats. I do not think that Republicans are going to win 51 seats in the Senate right now. I think that even though it's possible, it is significantly less likely than Democrats winning their 50. And so in Nevada, Catherine Cortez Masto is running for re-election against Adam Laxalt. The issue for Masto here is that Laxalt simply is not as terrible of a candidate as Mehmet Oz is in Pennsylvania, or Herschel Walker is in Georgia, or even Blake Masters in Arizona. We have 3 very strong Democrats in these 3 races against 3 surprisingly weak Republicans, but that's simply not the case in Nevada. We have 2 pretty generic Democrats and Republicans. And so Catherine Cortez Masto right now is only up in the polls by 0.7%. Adam Laxalt has led in the 3 most recent polls, or 4 most recent polls released for this race. Trafalgar had him up by 4%, which does suggest a very competitive race. Trafalgar is, of course, known for overestimating Republicans. A 4-point lead, though, does mean that Laxalt at least has some kind of edge against Masto. And so Masto was ahead for quite a while. She did lead in many polls during the early months of the summer, but that is no longer the case. Catherine Cortez Masto has not led in a poll in almost a month, and so a 0.7% lead is the margin that she has right now in the polling. 538 does still favor her very, very slightly. It is now a tilt race. Nevada was leading for Democrats for a couple of days, but Masto right now only has a 55% chance at winning her re-election to a second full term after first being elected by 2.4% in 2016. The same margin that Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton won Nevada in their presidential elections. Nevada really is not the blue state that it once was, and so as Nevada continues to become more purple, Republicans do stand a chance in this election, but right now, Catherine Cortez Masto is still very slightly favored, and I think that as a Democrat, she can win. In 2018, Democrats outperformed expectations in Nevada in both the Senate and governor elections, so you cannot count on Catherine Cortez Masto, but Adam Laxalt definitely has a higher chance of flipping this seat than the Republicans nominees do in states like Georgia or Arizona. And now we're left with just 4 more races, all of them for currently Republican-held seats. And so the most competitive one out of all 4 of these is going to be Wisconsin. Wisconsin is the election between Ron Johnson and Mandela Barnes. For quite a while, Ron Johnson looked like he was in a very good position to win his 3rd term in office after a surprise victory against Russ Feingold in just 2016. The poll 6 years ago suggested that Ron Johnson would not win his 2nd term. Russ Feingold was the former U.S. Senator elected in 1998 and 2004, but then lost his re-election to a 3rd term against Ron Johnson in 2010. And so in 2022, Russ Feingold is not running for a 3rd time since losing, but Ron Johnson is in a very competitive election against Mandela Barnes. Barnes is the lieutenant governor of Wisconsin, currently serving under Tony Evers, and for quite a while, Mandela Barnes looked like he was in a very good position to actually flip this seat. If you look at the polls that were released right after his nomination, Mandela Barnes led in the 5 polls that were conducted, and a poll conducted by the Trafalgar Group even had Barnes up by 2. However, since then, Ron Johnson has led in 5 out of the 6 most recent polls. Only one of them has shown Barnes up ahead, but this poll is significant as it is conducted by the A-rated Siena College. Emerson, though, does have Johnson up by 4, as well as an internal poll conducted by the National Republican Senatorial Committee. We also have 3 polls that showed Ron Johnson only ahead by 1%. And so this makes it so that Ron Johnson right now does have a very incremental lead, but a lead so small that it rounds to an even race between the 2 nominees. 538 has still Wisconsin as a toss-up state, with Ron Johnson, though, having the advantage with a 58% chance at winning. But if you look at his odds at one point in time, they went all the way down to 51, and at the beginning, he had a 77% chance at winning his 3rd term. So right now, Wisconsin still going to be a red state, but by a very, very small margin. And next up, we have another race that Republicans are struggling to defend, and this is the election in North Carolina. Ted Budd and Cheri Beasley, both very generic candidates for their parties. Richard Burr will not be seeking a 4th term. He announced this all the way back in 2016, and so Budd right now is still poised to win this race, but he is doing pretty poorly in the polls, only ahead by 0.3%. For quite a while, Cheri Beasley actually took the lead, and this is all concerning the fact that at one point, Ted Budd was up by 5.4% on average just a couple of months ago. So this election has become increasingly competitive over just the last couple of months, and if you look at the polls overall, most of them actually show Cheri Beasley in the lead. She also leads in the most recent poll conducted by Civics. Emerson, though, did have Budd up by 2. Trafalgar had Budd up by 3, so we're seeing a very competitive race here in North Carolina. Polls in North Carolina, though, have been known to overestimate Democrats, so I'm really not too confident in Cheri Beasley, considering the fact that she's actually down in the polls. I think that Ted Budd can win by around 3 to 4%, but polls right now only suggest a tilt margin of victory for Budd, just like they do for Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. 538 gives Budd a 62% chance of winning, making North Carolina only barely a lean Republican state. Definitely, this race is much closer than it should be. Ted Budd at one point had an 81% chance at winning this election. So even though North Carolina is close, I do still expect Republicans to win, and I think that the polls aren't really going to get too much better because in the end, Republicans are probably going to outperform expectations. And the final tilt Republican state that we have is going to be Ohio. Here, J.D. Vance is running to succeed Rob Portman with Tim Ryan as the Democratic nominee. And J.D. Vance is a spectacularly terrible Republican nominee. In 2018, Sherrod Brown won re-election to a 3rd term against Jim Bernanke by 6.8%. I'm not saying that Tim Ryan is going to win, but I think that out of all 3 of the tilt Republican states that we have on this map, Ohio is most likely to surprise us. I do think that there is a very small chance that Tim Ryan can actually surprise us and flip this seat. That's just how poor of a nominee J.D. Vance has been. Wisconsin, Ron Johnson as the incumbent is less likely for him to lose, and in North Carolina we have 2 pretty generic nominees, and of course in the past Democrats have tended to underperform. Democrats also underperform in Ohio, but in 2018 we saw Sherrod Brown elected by a pretty comfortable margin. So in 2022, with the polls showing J.D. Vance only ahead by 0.2%, that's definitely within the margin of error, and yes, I know that polls have been known to overestimate Democrats pretty significantly here, but I think if things continue to go well for Tim Ryan, he can gain the momentum to actually flip this seat. There are enough Democratic voters to win Ohio for Tim Ryan. He just needs to get them out to vote. And so right now, polling does suggest J.D. Vance with a very slight lead, but Marist College, an A-rated pollster, only has Vance up by 1%. I mean, this is just so small of a margin compared to the margin that Trump had in 2020 or 2018. And then if you look at the governor election in Ohio, Mike DeWine is currently expected to win by a solid margin. He's up by 15% in the polls. I do think he will help J.D. Vance, of course, Republican voters from Mike DeWine might also just vote for a Republican in the Senate race if they're not too informed. And so Tim Ryan is still definitely not the favorite candidate here, but he is running a very strong campaign. 538 only has Ohio as a lean Democratic state, and the polls only have it as tilt. And now the final election that we have is going to be one in Florida. Republicans are, of course, defending this seat, but it's much less competitive than the 3 tilt races that we have up here. Florida, we have the election between Marco Rubio and Val Demings. Rubio is running for his 3rd term in office, and he's up by 3.8% in the polls, a surprisingly small margin considering that he won by 8% in 2016. And recent polls have shown this race to be significantly closer than it was before. At one point, Rubio was leading by almost double digits against Val Demings at the beginning, but Val Demings has made this race much closer in just the last couple of weeks. Marco Rubio is doing significantly worse than Ron DeSantis is in the governor election against Charlie Crist. However, he still does have an 85% chance at winning. I do find it very hard to see that he's going to lose. And so as, of course, Florida becomes more and more of a Republican state, Trump winning it by 3.4% in 2020 and Republicans flipping the Senate seat held by Bill Nelson in 2018 as well, I think that Florida is going to remain red, with Marco Rubio winning by a likely margin, but polls currently only give him a 3.8% margin, so on this map, it's going to be a lean Republican state. And so for the races that I filled in as solid, some of these races are not going to be exactly solid when you look at the polls. Washington is only likely right now, as well as Connecticut. And then we also have likely margins for Republicans in states like Utah, Iowa, and Missouri. And so this right now is essentially the 2022 Senate map according to the polls. But we do see 51 states right now for the Democrats, 49 for the Republicans. And Democrats do have a cushion in Nevada. Even if Adam Laxalt does win this race, which I think is entirely possible, Republicans are still only at 50 seats. And not the 51 that they need to win back the majority. So that'll be it for this video. Very competitive races, especially in the 10 key Senate elections this year. And so definitely we have some pretty important races to watch, especially in these tilt races. Wisconsin, Ohio, North Carolina, and Nevada, they really could go either way. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below if you enjoyed it. Comment down below which party do you think will win the Senate majority, and do you think Tim Ryan can actually flip the Senate seat in Ohio? Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next video.